Put the rifle down, Mr. Cole. Step away from the wreckage. That's what Sheriff's Deputy Miller shouted, his hand hovering over his sidearm, standing right at the edge of my gravel drive, while the smoke from my old Marlin 336 still hung thick in the crisp New Mexico air. The thing itself, that hateful, buzzing, technological mosquito, lay about 30 feet out in the juniper scrub, its rotors shattered, its little camera eye cracked open and staring up at the vast, indifferent blue sky. For a second, I just stared at it too, and the silence that rushed in wasn't peace. Not yet. It was the sound of a world holding its breath. You could taste it, the pine needles, the gunpowder, and that single word echoing in my head. Sanctuary. You want to tell me exactly what happened here? Miller asked, trying to sound official but looking more confused than anything. Sure, I said, lowering the lever action slowly. I shot a felony. That damn thing was spying on me. He didn't know what to say to that. Most people don't. My name is Garrett Cole, 51. I used to be an investigator with the U.S. Forest Service, mostly tracking down timber thieves and drug runners in the national parks. These days, I just wanted to be left the hell alone. That's why I bought 40 acres of high desert solitude outside of Seraph Creek, tucked right up against the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. No covenants, no streetlights, and certainly no busybody Mesa Vista Homeowners Association telling me what color to paint my rain barrel. The deal was simple, peace for distance. And for 4 years, it worked, until the damn drones started showing up. The first time, I figured it was some kid testing a new toy. You know, just a quiet hum over the ridgeline. But it came back the next day, closer, floating right over the boundary I'd carefully marked with those old railroad ties. It paused and faced me head-on like it was taking my photograph. I waved it off, and it zipped away, quick as a hiccup. Fine. But on the third morning, 6:02 a.m., I remember because I was pouring my first cup of coffee and watching the sun hit the peaks. I saw it again. It was 10 feet from my kitchen window, hovering, its lens angled down right through the glass. I froze. Then, that tiny red light on its camera blinked, recording. All right, I thought, game on. You picked the wrong porch, friend. By the end of that week, the thing had a schedule. 6 a.m. flyover, 7:15 p.m. return pass. Always the same path, same arrogant, smooth flight pattern, always just outside my property line. Close enough to watch, not close enough to claim. So I did what a man with my background does. I started logging its visits. Time, direction, duration. I set up 3 high-res trail cameras, the ones I used to catch illegal logging, and christened the drone the Mosquito. When something dares to intrude on the silence you built for yourself, it's not just noise anymore. It's a declaration of war. The morning I shot it, the sky was clean and cold. I stepped out, coffee in one hand, the rifle in the other. The drone emerged from the scrub oak, matte black, unmarked, steady as a tax collector. It stopped, lens tilting, and I swear, it felt like it recognized me. I raised the Marlin, lined up the bead, and squeezed the trigger. The blast cracked the morning open like an egg. Plastic, smoke, and that stunning, immediate silence followed. I thought that was the end. But of course, I should have known better. Peace always costs more than you think. The next morning, the silence felt hollow. I walked the property line at sunrise, 30 to 30 resting in the crook of my arm. No tracks, no debris, just that feeling, that skin-crawling sixth sense honed by 20 years of hunting men who didn't want to be found. I pulled the memory cards from my cameras. The footage confirmed it. Clean, precise, professional equipment. I zoomed in on one frame, a definite infrared flare. It wasn't filming me for fun. It was mapping. My heat signature, the land contour, maybe both. That's when the investigator in me kicked in. I set up my new routine. Coffee, check cameras, patrol the south perimeter. And by the end of the week, they sent its replacement. Same model, just keeping its distance, floating high above the juniper line. But I could read its posture. It was tactical, patient. Whoever was flying it had training. One evening, around 10, I was watching it through a cheap scope. It wasn't random. It moved in slow, deliberate arcs along my southern edge, right where my land bordered the Mesa Vista development. They weren't after me personally, I realized. They were after that strip of land. I wasn't collecting stories anymore. I was collecting evidence. A few days later, it arrived. A thin, expensive envelope in my mailbox. No return address. The label read, Mesa Vista HOA Compliance Committee Notice. I laughed out loud. There wasn't an HOA within 3 counties of my deed. The letter was pure corporate jargon, talking about aesthetic expectations, non-conforming structures, and how my property did not conform to the community corridor. It ended with a threat of fines. So I walked back inside and called the Taos County Assessor's office. The clerk, a woman named Dolores, sounded tired until I gave her my parcel number. Sir, your property isn't under any HOA. You're outside the Mesa Vista overlay by nearly a full mile. If they sent you a notice, they have no standing whatsoever. That's harassment at best. I thanked her, hit save on the audio recording of the conversation. Old habits die hard, and pinned the letter to my corkboard, right above the pictures of the mosquito wreckage. Then came the escalation. A white pickup rolled up my drive, kicking up dust. A man in a high-vis vest and khaki pants stepped out, clipboard in hand, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Morning, sir, he chirped. Name's Dennis. Cielo Survey Solutions. Just here for a routine boundary recheck for the Mesa Vista HOA. Nothing to worry about. That line, nothing to worry about, always meant the opposite. I let him set up. He unfolded a tripod, but the scanner he was using wasn't standard issue, too sleek, no laser line. More like a mobile LiDAR mapper. He spent the entire 15 minutes pacing along my southern fence line, the drone's favorite spot, and paused longest by the old stone retaining wall near my well. I watched him aim his scanner downward, not across. That unit give you readings in feet or meters? I asked, walking over slow. He shifted, blocking the screen. Oh, both. Pretty versatile. Sorry, proprietary data, you know. Proprietary, my ass. I watched him leave, then walked straight to the wall. Boot prints were fresh in the dust. One small triangular divot from his tripod was aligned perfectly with where the drone had hovered days earlier. He wasn't checking boundaries. He was documenting a violation they hadn't invented yet. So I decided to set a trap. I pulled up my old USFS GIS software, created a copy of my property overlay, and deliberately added a fake discrepancy, a narrow strip along the boundary marked as unverified zone. And here's the key. On the corner of the map, invisible to the naked eye, I embedded a watermark that only appeared under infrared light. It was a series of microdots spelling out, County Appeal Boundary Error, Do Not Distribute. I printed it, sealed it in a folder labeled Dispute 2024, and left it on my workbench, slightly visible through the window. 4 days later, it came. A new envelope, heavier. Inside, a formal statement citing recent boundary survey findings and claiming my stone wall encroached 7 feet into a community preservation easement. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the lie. They had copied the fake overlay exactly, down to the watermark I'd hidden in the corner. The letter from the Mesa Vista HOA was now printing, verbatim, the words, County Appeal Boundary Error. That was no clerical mistake. That was evidence of collusion and falsification. I stopped laughing. Now I was cold. I followed the money. Cielo Survey Solutions didn't exist in the state registry. The active email traced back to an office suite rented directly by Mesa Vista HOA. The independent contractor was literally working for Karen Billis, the HOA chairwoman, in a different uniform. They weren't verifying. They were manufacturing violations, and they just stepped straight into my snare. I cataloged everything, backed up every file, and sealed them into 3 separate drives. One went into the safe. One went into a lockbox in town. That's not paranoia, friend, that's insurance. The second time the mosquito showed up, it was twilight. It came out of the pines, sleek, dark, and deliberate. Lower this time, slower, almost as if it was taunting me. It hovered maybe 10 feet past the porch railing, its lens angled dead at my face. That single red light blinked. On, off, on again. You just couldn't stay away, could you? I muttered. I rose slow, steady. The drone adjusted its height, tracking my movement. I took 1 step forward, then another, until I could see my own reflection in its lens, just a blur of shadow, rifle, and resolve. I didn't warn it. There are some trespasses you don't negotiate. The marlin roared again. The drone wobbled midair like it couldn't believe what just happened, then spun violently, slamming into the underbrush with a metallic crunch. The echo rolled across the valley, and then silence. Real silence. The kind that hums in your bones. I walked down, bagged the wreckage, and carried it back to the workshop. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Because I finally had something they couldn't take back. Proof. It didn't take long for the cavalry to arrive. Sheriff Miller and his deputy were back the next morning. Karen Billis, the HOA chairwoman, had filed a report of criminal mischief and destruction of community assets. "You've got quite the setup here, Mr. Cole," Miller said, looking around. "Cameras, motion sensors. Most folks don't go to this much trouble. Most folks don't get stalked by a flying peeping Tom," I replied. I poured them coffee and set a flash drive on the table. "Everything you need is on here. Drone footage from my trail cams, 3 angles, timestamps, GPS overlay. You'll see that drone entering private airspace at least a dozen times in the last month." Miller took the drive, but I saw the doubt in his eyes. He still saw me as a volatile, gun-toting eccentric. That evening, I tore into the drone wreckage. Inside the casing, nestled beside the cracked camera, was a solid-state drive, heat-shielded, expensive, with its serial markings scratched off. And next to it, a small GPS board labeled Maverick Tactical Logging Unit. Military or law enforcement grade. This was no kid's toy. I hooked the SSD to my forensic dock. What I found was worse than encryption: 61 flights over 90 days. Every single one centered only on my property. It wasn't mapping the terrain. It was mapping me. I watched the infrared footage, me tinning the fire pit, me trimming the creek path. Then the one that made my blood run cold. The drone hovering, zoomed in on my outdoor shower. Another clip, at 2:04 a.m., outside my bedroom window. This wasn't about land. This was personal. They were collecting intelligence. Then, the final piece of the puzzle. I swept my truck for trackers. Tucked up under the rear bumper, magnet-mounted, I found a GPS device with an active SIM chip. When Deputy Miller came back, I slid the tracker across the table. Passenger side rear. Would have slipped past anyone not looking for it. 3 days later, he called. His voice was quiet. "Trackers registered through a shell company, Mr. Cole. Payment trace goes to a business account under Mesa Vista HOA." I didn't answer right away. I just let the silence hang. They'd crossed the line from nuisance to criminal enterprise. I called my old friend, Janine Rivers, an ex-JAG attorney. I sent her everything. The drone logs, the tracking report, the fake HOA letter, the forged map. She called back within the hour. "Jesus, Garrett, this isn't just overreach. This is a program." While Janine drafted a counterclaim for harassment, unauthorized surveillance, and invasion of privacy, I took the second route. Media. I called the only reporter I trusted, Tabitha Vance, out of Santa Fe. 3 days later, the bomb dropped. Front page, the Santa Fe Review. Drone wars. HOA accused of illegal surveillance on non-member property. My photos were there. The broken drone, the red-circled flight maps. Tabitha had found other homeowners near Mesa Vista who'd received compliance letters despite being outside the boundaries. This wasn't just my fight anymore. Janine subpoenaed the corporate records. The shell company traced back to a private analytics firm in Arizona called Civic Sense, specializing in residential compliance analytics, a fancy term for data-driven surveillance sold to HOAs. Mesa Vista was their pilot program. They weren't just after my land. They were testing a model for control. The county district attorney announced an official investigation. They raided the HOA office. What they found was a horror show. 6 dossiers, my address included, filled with high-resolution drone photos, license plate logs, social media screenshots, and handwritten notes. Refused HOA offer. Anti-compliance attitude. Probable violation. Karen Billis, the HOA chairwoman, went on local radio, claiming it was an overzealous contractor. But the county records showed 6 forged plats, 2 falsified notices, and a paper trail of payments to Civic Sense totaling over $40,000. Tabitha's second article landed like a hammer. Karen was arrested on charges of forgery and conspiracy. Her world was collapsing. Mine was finally quiet. You can tell a lot about justice by the sound of the courtroom. That morning, in the old Taos County Courthouse, it smelled of floor wax and history. Karen Billis sat across from me, her face tight enough to hold a grudge without blinking. Her lawyer was sweating. Janine sat beside me, calm as ice. When Janine presented the evidence, she moved like a surgeon. The drone wreckage, the GPS tracker report, the forensic data logs. Then, the knockout blow, the forged property map with the infrared watermark. Judge Alston, a silver-haired woman with the patience of a saint, leaned down. This says, do not distribute. Care to explain that, Ms. Billis? Karen's lawyer whispered, clerical oversight. Clerical oversight, the judge replied dryly, doesn't usually involve tampering with county plat maps. When it was my turn, I kept it simple. I moved to that land for silence. Instead, I got drones watching me shower and letters pretending to own my ground. Karen, finally on the stand, grew defiant. I only wanted to preserve community harmony. Mr. Cole was hostile, uncooperative, dangerously independent. The judge leaned back. Dangerously independent. I'll remember that one. Then Janine hit her with the signed payment authorization to Civic Sense, followed by an internal HOA memo with Karen's handwriting. Target parcels. High-value lots. Minimal resistance. The room went dead silent. The gavel struck once, sharp and final. The verdict arrived 2 days later. The court found Karen Billis and the Mesa Vista HOA guilty of multiple counts of forgery, conspiracy, and unlawful surveillance. Then came the part that felt less like law and more like poetry. The court recognized me, Mr. Garrett Cole, as having acted within his legal rights to defend property, privacy, and personal safety under state law. Damages awarded, $320,000. And Karen Billis was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. Janine stood and made one final request, that the HOA be required to issue a public apology, printed in the Santa Fe Review and permanently displayed on their website. Judge Alston didn't hesitate. Granted, and make sure it includes the phrase, we acknowledge the wrongful surveillance, overreach, and harassment committed by our leadership. I didn't stop for the reporters. I just walked down the courthouse steps and into the afternoon sun. I'd said everything that mattered inside that room. The settlement came through a week later. The money didn't matter. What mattered was what came after. The HOA dissolved under court order. I directed $25,000 to a local nonprofit that helps families fight abusive HOA clauses. A full circle from silence to voice. Now, I have a sign made of brushed steel mounted right where the mosquito fell. It reads, "No HOA. No spying. Trespassers will be litigated." Tourists love it. They stop for selfies, thinking it's a joke. I let them, because once, I thought it was just noise, too. I keep the scorched housing of the mosquito in a case in my workshop, a reminder, not of fear, but of resolve. You earn piece by piece, file by file. They call me paranoid. They call me hostile. They call me dangerously independent. Maybe I am. But this morning, the county sheriff stopped by for coffee. He smiled and said, "Place looks quiet again, Garrett." "That's the idea," I told him. No drones, only hawks. As his car rolled away, the sound faded into the pines, and there it was again, the silence. The kind that hums through the mountains and seeps into your bones. The kind that means no one is watching. The kind I moved here for. I won my battle for privacy, but these HOA-run surveillance programs are spreading across the country. I want to know what you think. Is it ever justifiable for a community organization to monitor a private citizen like this, even if they claim it's for safety? Do you think the judge was right to call me dangerously independent? What would you have done when that drone showed up at your window? Drop a comment below and let me know your take. If you found this story compelling, hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more stories about standing up for your rights against institutional overreach.